Hello there and welcome to Presence. This is a show about how do you live and lead more consciously, more mindfully. I'm Ravi Tangri and this is my lovely co-host, Holly Duckworth from Denver.
Good morning, Ravi. Great to see you today. It has been a very big, energetic week in the universe and in the lives of at least many of my clients and my friends. What are you experiencing this week?
Absolutely the same thing. A lot of movement for, as you say, for clients, both individuals and organizations I work with. I just did a strategic planning session Monday, Tuesday that was just, the results were just over the moon. Phenomenal. And I'm feeling the change as well. A lot of stuff opening up and things changing here.
Yes. So this week's show, we have a great show. We're planned, and we're kind of talking, continuing this talk on the book of the 5 things we cannot change and the happiness we find by embracing them. And of course, by divine alignment, on this week's show, we're talking about saying yes to feelings. And we planned this several weeks ago, but how perfect it is that we're both feeling a little lighter. And when I use the word light, I always like to tell people that light to me means both light in terms of like a light bulb and light in terms of weight, that I feel both lighter as in brighter and lighter as in terms of weight. So I sign all my emails with love and with light. So how to say yes to feelings is about kind of accepting that light in you. And so we always start the show with a definition of kind of where we're going. In today's show on feelings, we want to start by letting people know that when we talk about feelings, we're talking about an emotional state or a reaction that often comes from a belief, be it a conscious or an unconscious belief. And, when we were bantering back and forth about this show, we want people to think about, where are they accepting their feelings, and maybe where are we choosing to go numb or turn off our feelings? And how can we get to a place, as the author says, where feelings become the fast track to intimacy? And I always break down the word intimacy when I read it or hear it. Into me I see. So today's show, how to say yes to feelings, kind of starts from that place of saying yes to your own feelings. How can you become comfortable and both strong and vulnerable enough to feel joy, love, peace, passion, anger, fear, confusion? Because when we accept these feelings, when we say yes to feelings, I believe, or at least it's been my experience, that can become the fuel for change, can become fuel for love, and certainly the good things that I want to have manifested in my life. What's your take on feelings, Ravi?
Well, and that's the change personally, for organizationally as well, because we're talking about leadership as well. You cannot get a high-performing team without passion. You cannot create that level of performance just from pure logic. Now, the other thing with the definition piece I want to get to is a lot of times people put labels on certain feelings as bad. That, anger, fear, sadness, those are bad feelings. There's no such thing as a bad feeling. It's just a feeling. And I think the trouble is it's that when we block it, that it festers and it starts to create a whole bunch of caca. If you allow yourself to feel, it flows, and it flows through you. Sometimes it's big feelings and perhaps you need some sort of support to do that, but still it's feeling it and being present with it. And because the show is about presence, and how do you flow through it, and it flows through you. So that's the caveat I put to the definition, is I don't believe there's such a thing as a bad feeling, and we've got to be very careful about that.
In our current race consciousness or our societal thinking, often there's an undercurrent that feelings are scary, or I can't feel, or I don't know how to feel, or people are telling you stop crying, no crying in baseball, no, especially with young boys. I recently watched a movie on that, and our author talks about how we need to look at feelings as safe, and he has an acronym for that: sadness, anger, fear, and exuberance. You could certainly make your own acronym for what works for you, but giving yourself permission to feel all of these things. And when we do that, we empower others to feel as well. I know as a prayer practitioner, as an executive coach, and as a speaker, the more that I lean into my feelings and I authentically share those feelings, the more people feel drawn into me and come into my sphere of influence, because they know I'm going to be there for them when the feeling is fun and joyful, and I'm going to be there for them when, you know, they've had somebody in their family pass away. So these things that, you know, I just gave all sort of personal examples, all have real dollar value and resonance in our companies too. How can you create a company that is a place that honors the joyful moments and some of the challenges as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's what I said earlier. You cannot have outstanding performance without passion. Right? I think Dennis Kinlaw in the book Coaching for Commitment said the only way to get consistently outstanding work from people is for people to want to. Right? You can terrorize satisfactory work and occasional blips, but you cannot coerce outstanding work unless they want to, unless they're excited, unless they're passionate, unless they're enjoying what they're doing. And the thing is, that opens the door. If you're not letting feelings in, you can't just say, I just want happy feelings in the workplace. You know, it's back to, a lot of times people say we've got a work life and we've got a home life. You don't. You got one life, and it flows from one to the other. And if caca's happening at home, guess what? You're going to be carrying a lot of the feelings in to the workplace. And so this is, to me, the real test of a leader is, are you able to create a safe environment where you can support your people in finding a way to deal with that, and not just say, oh, no, you can't bring it, you know, that's home, I don't want it coming into work. I mean, that's autocratic 1940 style management. That's not leadership, right? It's about how do you create that safe environment where people can feel good, bad, ugly, whatever the feelings are.
So one of the concepts we wanted to share with our friends in our audience today was this idea of feelings as an intellectual concept versus feelings as a touching concept. You know, I languaged a lot of words: peace, joy, love, happiness, as, you know, feelings, feeling anger. And we can certainly Google those and we can get an intellectual definition of what we think those experiences are.
Yep.
But a true person practicing the presence or learning to live and lead consciously is going to take these intellectual concepts and move them from their head down into their heart, and allow their heart and their body and the cellular structure that they are to feel those things. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Ravi?
Well, you know, something else that relates to that popped into mind is that it's been shown that effective leaders, what they do is they, when they have to make a decision, they don't know they do this. They do this unconsciously. They sort of sit back and they look at like 100 different what if scenarios. They just go with that. And then the one that jumps out is the one that feels right to them. That's a proven unconscious strategy of effective leaders. Now, the thing is, if you're not allowing people to bring their emotions into work, one of the biggest rising things that's happened lately is something called not absenteeism, but presenteeism. It's like, you know, people are there, they're not away, but hello, nobody's home, right? They're just sort of sitting there non-productive because they're not engaged. They're burned out by change after change after change. And it's, how do you re-engage those people to bring them back in? That's the work of a leader.
We got a lot going on in corporate America today.
Mm-hmm.
Do we really have time to push this conversation? How do we make this the time for this in this 24/7, 365 world?
The thing is, we don't have, it's a friend of mine who says, we don't have the time to do it quickly. Because if you do it quickly, you're jumping over the real root issues. You're just dealing with the surface stuff. If you're not dealing with all of this stuff, and this isn't just the corporate world, this is in your personal world. If you're not acknowledging what you're feeling, you're you're not allowing yourself to be fully present, to bring what you have to the moment, to bring what you have to where you are. As a leader, if you're not allowing your people that opportunity, and I'm not saying you have these venting sessions in the middle of wherever, it's you know, you may create a private situation, but sometimes people just need it. Like I can't tell you the number of times I've had someone, when I've been in an organization, come to me and go, you know, they're ticked off at something, go, rah, 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 rah. And I go, okay, so this is what's happened, this is what happened, right? And this is, what would you like me to do? And they go, well, I don't, rah, 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 right? And so, okay, so this, what would you like me to do? And they go, well, nothing, I guess. You can't really do anything. I just needed to get it off my chest. How do you?
Now I know your name is Ravi, because everybody goes rah 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 to you.
Yeah. So, and for you too, do you have that? You know, do you have that lifeline? Call a friend that you can go say, you know, let's have a beer, let's have a coffee, and I'm just going to vent and dump, and you're going to sit there and smile and nod. You're not going to fix anything. You're just going to let me do it. Do you have that ability? If it's one of these, you know, the fear, anger, that sort of thing. Like joy's perhaps easier to deal with, but
the author Dave Rico says, we fear feelings because we wonder if we'll be able to turn them off when we want to. That is, to be in control of them. We fear feelings because they're not always pretty. Sometimes we are not in control of how they come out. We fear feelings because they may lead to us falling apart, and we're not sure that we can control putting ourselves back together. And I think that this fear and control concept go hand in hand. Yet, my experience has been all of life is this evolutionary thing. So the more that I allow myself to remember that the seasons come, the seasons go, the fear and the joy come and they go, it creates that ability for flexibility, for feelings to be safe. I feel safe in my feelings because I know it's just a feeling and this too shall pass.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I go back to my favorite book, my favorite quote from Rico, I think, is that fear is a resistance to what is. If we're feeling that in the moment, that's what is. It's not wrong. It's not, you know, and if you can breathe into the fear, like this is what we'll get into in the tips, because we've got a number, I think, so we'll probably move fairly quickly, but it's what is. And it's not about resisting and blocking it. It's about really allowing ourselves to feel. And if it's fear right now, how can you breathe into it and be present with it? And if you're in a leadership role, how can you allow your people that space, that they can be present, that you can honor that? Now, that does not mean if you've got a friend or if you've got an employee who's feeling upset about something, that doesn't mean you go down the spiral of feeling lousy as well, because then you make yourself totally resourceless. You can be with them and empathic without getting sucked into their emotions. In fact, you want to be more resourceful, so you have more to bring them, right?
I think the feelings and the fear have a direct relationship to trust. In this past week, I was working with some clients around this idea of feelings. And in both cases, they had someone close to them pass away. And they were fearful about going to their boss and saying, I need time off to go to a funeral or go to some grief training or that type of thing. And yet when they did that, they were authentic with their feelings and what they needed. In both cases, the boss, the leadership was very supportive of that time. So I think we need to look at where are we creating those trust places in the good times, so that same trust is there in the interesting or the bad, as we label them, bad feelings.
Well, you know, it's funny. I spent a lot of time in the 90s working with national defense, teaching them how to question the rules. And that was the interesting thing is, like, when they are about to go into combat, you know, they don't have time to sit down for a team meeting. But it's exactly what you said. It's when they're not in combat that the real leaders stuck out. Those were the times that they were listening, finding out what people, so the trust was there. And in fact, There was one leader, I was blown away that, yes, you don't have time for a team meeting, but when they were ready to jump out of a plane, he would boom, 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 make eye contact with every single one and make sure they were on board before they jumped.
Absolutely. We have to remember too, feelings are not to be confused with a state of mind. That, our state of mind may be calm and peaceful, but our feelings inside may be confusion or scared or lack or even sometimes joy. And then in the book, Rico talks about feelings are three-dimensional. And I really love this part because I think it stretches us as spiritual beings. He says, feelings resonate in our bodies with the changes of our heartbeat, the changes of the pulse, the breathing, the release of serotonin, adrenaline, and neuroperipherin. I knew I was not going to get that.
Neuroperipherin, yeah.
I knew I was not going to get that word right. It is the constriction and the expansion of our blood vessels. Feelings are three-dimensional. They are psychological, spiritual. Feelings also have they have a body, mind, and spirit. They have a body, psychological, and spiritual dimension. In a healthy expression of feelings, all three dimensions come through. The body, the mind, and the soul are honored. And if we're going to create a life that we love, a life we can be present in, and a business where we can lead being fully present, I think we need to utilize feelings as one tool to move us into all three: body, mind, and spiritual dimensions.
Excellent. So I think we need to start moving into the tips because we've got a number of things that we want to bring today, correct? In terms
I think so too. And thanks to our viewers who are watching online, the chat room is open, so feel free to drop us a question while we share those tips with you.
Yeah. And so one of the things, that first tip is, a lot of times, like Holly said, what we do is instead of feeling, we're thinking about what we're feeling. We're not truly in the feeling, we're thinking about it. And when we get too caught up in this head voice. So if you were watching our show on intuition a few weeks back, I showed you how to access your heart voice, a really simple way. There's an intermediate step that's really easy to silence that chatter, because that just gets you totally out of your feelings. So right now, if you could, here's what I'd like you to do is think about that internal dialogue. Get that in your head. Say something to your head, and first sense, and don't say it aloud, Holly, because for the others watching, but get an answer. First sense that you have, where in your head is it coming from? The middle, top, left, right, front, back, wherever, right? First sense, where is that? It sounds like a crazy question, but just go with the first sense. You got a sense of it?
Yep.
Okay, now imagine you could, almost like you pull it on a string, pull it right to the very back of your head. Imagine that you could do that. And how, and what would you notice, Holly, if you did that? Is there any change in the quality of the voice?
Mine gets a little quieter.
Yeah, so that's different for different people. But now, from there, imagine again, like you're pulling it on a piece of string. There's a spot where your spine, top of your spine meets your skull. And imagine you could snuggle it right in there, and there's a spot. And what do you notice happens when you put it right in there?
It disappears.
Right. I have no idea why it works, but the way our neurophysiology works, they've studied monks who meditated for 50 years, and they didn't consciously do it, but one of the things that they did is they moved their inner dialogue back there, and somehow it cannot function there. It just goes away. And that lets you be really, truly present. So you're not thinking about the feelings. You don't keep it there. You need to, you're in a dialogue, but when it comes back, you'll find that it behaves a lot better. But for a moment, if you're overwhelmed by your inner dialogue, just put it in that spot for a while where the spine meets the skull. And that allows you to really step into the feelings, to be present in the moment and breathe into the moment.
So Ravi, how is that different than numbing my feelings? Because, the show today is all about saying yes to feelings. How is that an activity that allows me to say yes to the feelings, but also you say it kind of turns my feelings off? Help me resolve that.
It turns the voice off, not the feelings. And the voice is what gets in the way. So if you don't have that internal chatter, you can be a whole lot more present. The chatter takes you out of the present moment. And the other thing that I find helps you be in the moment is take a nice deep breath as you do that. In fact, I find when I move my voice there, I naturally breathe and I step into the moment, so I feel more. It's not numbing the feelings, it's shutting off the voice and the dialogue.
So another tip we had, and it was around languaging your feelings, that so often, because our society is moving so fast, we don't often take the time to actually have the words for our feelings. So we wanted to invite people to take a moment out to listen to their heart voice. You know, Ravi just talked about the importance of breathing. Again, breathe out of your head, but breathe into your heart. Really take that time to feel your stomach expanding and contracting, and tap into your own inner wisdom about what it is you're feeling. I know as I began my spiritual study many years ago, I really learned there was a lot of words I didn't have. Grace, joy at that time wasn't really a word. Peace wasn't really a word in my languaging. You know, I certainly had anger and frustration and my word pissosity, but so take some time, in the world of, Google and technology, to let yourself find the right words for how it is you're feeling. And Ravi mentioned earlier in the show, sometimes we don't have time to go slow, but if you're going to step into that spiritual flow that is the divine of your life, sometimes it does require us to sort of step back, get new words and move forward, and then be willing to articulate those very slowly. Last week was my crazy birthday, and Ravi and I had several shows where he's like, how are you feeling? I don't even know how I'm feeling. I've got to stop here for a second and let myself breathe into my heart space. I feel confusion. I feel excitement. I'm concerned. And so the more you practice this again, finding the words for how you're feeling, you invite others to do the same. So sometimes, when Ravi and I are leading, facilitations or retreats, we take the opportunity to give people a few moments to feel into that space. Are you feeling anxious about the retreat? Are you feeling nervous about this meeting? Are you excited because we get to celebrate some great accomplishment? And my experience is when I let people get fully out of their head, into their heart about that feeling, it then empowers that meeting and that experience going forward.
Now, we had a question here about, it's a great question about distinguish between emotion feeling and body sense feeling. And so body sense, because we talk about feelings in different ways. So this touch is feeling, right? That's not what we're talking about. So touch, pressure, even warmth, the cold, those sort of things are physical feelings. What we are talking about, the emotional feelings that often are more internal to what you're dealing with. So as you said, some of the more familiar ones are things like joy, anger, fear, love. Those are some of the more common ones. But you were saying that there's a lot of subtleties that you can get: feeling of grace, feeling of pride. Those are not some things that are direct physical feeling, but it's a more internalized feeling. Or how would you separate the two, Holly?
I think you nailed it. That's kind of how I do it. And because I'm working with this more and more each day, I think for me, the trigger points are when I'm not feeling the way society says I should feel. I had a post this week. I've just signed another national writing contract, and I had a ton of people that really loved that. But yet my feeling nature was like, this is no big deal. And so I think that saying yes to feelings is sometimes saying yes to the question, why am I feeling this way or not feeling this way? And am I going to choose to step in line with the race consciousness, the way people think I should feel, or am I going to give myself permission to feel the way I need to feel? And that can happen in certainly good times, and it can happen in challenging times, because there are certain beliefs. I think feelings are tied to societal beliefs that you should feel a certain way when a certain thing happens, and that may or may not be true for me. And as a person practicing presence, we need to be in a place where we can honor that for ourselves, And then certainly as we dovetail to our next tip, how can we honor that for other people as well? That as you say yes to feelings, you say yes to freedom to feel what you need to feel.
Right. So before we move there, Nancy asked another great follow-up questions. Is there corresponding body sense to emotions? And yeah, there are physiological feeling to the emotions. The thing is, those are not unique necessarily. Like one of the things, my favorite is that the physiological response to nervousness and fear is often identical to excitement. Your heart races, your pulse goes up, all of these sort of things. These are physical characteristics people have when they're afraid, that people have when they're excited, but it's how we interpret it. So the way what Holly mentioned, putting a name to the feeling, and the best way is to go to your heart voice. And now, for those, you can go back to our show on intuition, and I'll show you more details. But it's basically taking that voice you moved here and moving it down in here, where it can maybe very quiet, it may be more of a feeling, and you ask your heart voice, what is it, truth? What is it that I'm feeling now? And listen for what your intuition says. And that heart voice for me is where we can start to, I'm still a scientist in many ways. We calibrate. So you feel a certain way. You go to your heart voice and say, truth, what is this that I am feeling? And allow that to come. So for you, that's what you're feeling. It's not the physiological, it is the emotional response.
Rico closes this chapter with an affirmation. He says, may I find safety in my feelings, and may those I come into contact with find feeling responses in me, so that love can flourish between us and all the universe. Again, it's starting with that self first and moving out. So if you're having an in your body feeling, honor that. May you feel safe in the feeling of that, and know that that's going to change and evolve both as you move those feelings from your head into your heart, and then certainly those feelings will move out and new feelings will move in.
Yeah. And we're just coming up to our time. So just really quickly, what you had mentioned, Holly, about how to honor other people's feelings as a friend, as a leader. How do you create that space? And it might be as simple as what I said, where someone comes and vents, and I just say, okay, I acknowledge, and I really show that I heard them by provide some feedback. And what would you like me to do? And then they, and then ask them, what would you like me to do? And usually it's nothing, but they just needed that. But it's the key is what you were talking about, compassion, right, Holly?
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned that I think that was definitely a word I didn't have prior to my really spiritual training and knowledge. And I would think that Ravi and I may do a future show on this topic, but compassion, how can you come to that neutral place if you don't have to take it on and you don't have to push it away, that you can hold, that's another show, hold the space, that you can just simply be present to what is in their feelings, and certainly honor your own feelings, but you don't have to take that on. I think right now, in terms of the election and Black Lives Matter, and I mean, there's just tons of stuff going on that's happening in personal life and in our business life and all those things. And so many of us are attuned. We either have to attack it or we have to ignore it. And yet I think there's a middle ground that says we can hold compassion for both sides and know that a power greater than us, a spirit, a God, an Allah, a Buddha, whatever, is going to bring peace and love and presence to that. And the more that each of us as individuals can hold that compassion, that neutral place in business, in life, God help us, in politics, the more that the divine good of life will come through.
So that is coming to the end of our time here. The next show is how to say yes to life.
Yay! Woohoo!
And Holly and I also have some neat surprises coming in the next couple of weeks for you. You can follow these all on YouTube, in my channel, on Facebook, on both of our pages. Please feel free to send us feedback. We really, really welcome it and appreciate it. Thank you for the questions. And also you can find us on iTunes, right, Holly?
Yes, Present. Google Ravi or myself, you'll find us. Presence Show on iTunes. We've said yes to life. We're grateful you've said yes to the show, and we look forward to more shows in the future.
Have an amazing weekend and welcome to fall. Okay.